Hey, welcome to AzureFunBytes. My name's Jay Gordon. Let's get into it about Linux storage. Azure Disk Storage allows you to add additional block-level storage to your Azure VMs, including Linux. By making use of managed storage, you can simply pick out the size and type of your storage. Let's use the Azure portal to quickly and easily create new storage that will attach to our Linux virtual machine. On the Disks pane, click Add Data Disk. Click the drop-down menu for name and select Create Disk. Under the name for your managed disk, review the default settings, update as necessary, and then click Create. Click Save to create the managed disk and update the VM configuration. After Azure creates the disk and attaches it to the virtual machine, the new disk is listed in the VM's disk settings under Data Disk, as managed disks are a top-level resource. The disk appears at the root of the resource group. Once you've attached this new hard disk to your Linux VM, you can begin the process of using fdisk to partition it. Mount the file system, put it in FS tab so that when you reboot it, you still have your attached hard disk. Along with disk, there's also Azure Files. SMB, that's right, a file share you can mount right to your server in the cloud. Azure Linux VMs are ready for you to explore how to extend your Azure storage options. You can see more documentation in the links below, or you can get started using $200 free with Azure if you just go ahead and click this link. Once again, my name is Jay. I'll see you next time on Azure Fun Bites.
Hey everybody, welcome back to Azure Fun Bites. My name's Jay Gordon, I'm your host. And it's opening day in baseball. I'm a big Yankees fan. And because of that, I've made my little show here Yankees themed. I got my Yankees t-shirt on. But I'm not really going to be talking baseball today because the person I'm going to be talking with, I don't think we've ever talked about baseball. I don't think it's something we would. But we're going to talk about a lot of awesome stuff. Coming on right now, the amazing, wonderful, great David Blank-Edleman. Hey, David, how are you?
Hey, what is this sports ball thing you speak of?
You
think what?
Okay, there. You're a little off, but I think I got you. Your voice is a little off to the microphone. Not really sure why, but I got
That's
you.
weird.
Anyhow,
I was just asking what's this sports ball thing you're talking about?
Well, you know, I am one of those people that happens to like professional sports, whether you're into it or not. It's just my thing. I always can appreciate what people do dig. And so I'm just lucky that today's opening day and that baseball is even happening. Like, it's a really weird world. But anyway, I want to get a second to kind of introduce and talk to you for a second, all right? Is that cool?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Awesome. So great. So first of all, let's talk a little bit about you and what you do. So you work alongside myself and a lot of other people at Microsoft in the advocacy team.
Right.
Can you tell me a little bit about what you do other than I know what I do, but why don't you tell me about what you do?
Yeah, so I'm a cloud advocate at Microsoft in the developer relations group, and I focus specifically on modern operations and even more specifically, a lot on site reliability engineering. That's sort of my jam.
Cool.
And I've been in the operations space for some 35 odd years now. Grew up as a sysadmin, did DevOpsy things. Now are in the SRE space, but my heart is still very much sysadmin. And I still get tech support calls as if I were. So for sure, like from my family and et cetera. So I am for sure. That's where my heart lies is that realm. And the stuff that we're talking about today, it makes me so happy.
Yeah, I really enjoy kind of bringing things down to a really, really basic level when we're talking about how to get started using Azure. Let me fix this camera here. I got to get into the ballpark. It looks like I was outside. There we go.
It looked like you're on a barber chair is what that just looked like as you sort of went doop, doop, doop. So it was really cool.
Well, technology allows us to do cool things nowadays. So anyway.
Yeah, for sure.
So let me ask you a little bit before we kind of get into the subject. I know you wrote a book. And I would love to kind of talk about that for a second, if you wouldn't mind.
Sure.
Tell me about like what that whole process was like, and how people could really benefit from the stuff you wrote. I'd love to hear just the basics of, what David was thinking about when he got this idea about this book.
Well, so there are two books. Oh, yeah. So there's the Otterbook, right, which is from the vastly out-of-date website. So the Otterbook was the first book that I wrote for O'Reilly, and that was how to automate system administration with Perl. Basically, I woke up, I'd wanted to write a book for a long time, didn't know what to do, and I woke up one day after having like a really bad cold with a fever, and in my fever dream, like, I know exactly what I can write. I can write about this. I can write about how we can automate stuff. And this was O'Reilly's first book on how to take a language and how to do stuff with it. And I attempted in that book to make sure that I could both teach people basic sysadmin stuff that they needed to know, a little bit of Perl they needed to know, and also some just basic, philosophy about how to think about things. And that was what I was shooting for. So that was many moons ago, which is where the Otterbook name comes from. My Twitter handle comes from that. And that was a process of just not knowing what it was like to write a book, and then just going blindly into it, going, okay, I know what I want to say. I know, there's a lot of stuff here, and that which I don't know, I'm going to learn along the way in order to write a book. It to my surprise, people dug it, and I still have people coming up to me this day saying, I learned Perl from you, or I learned, the basics of system administration from you, and that does my heart something. It makes me happy. Let's put it that way.
And then there's your other book that I wanted to bring up as well, which I feel like is super, super kind of relevant to the stuff we're going to be discussing today. This is your Seeking SRE book. And so give me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so Seeking SRE was a book that I wanted to write or at least edit and compile because there had been previously two good books put out by Google about site reliability engineering. But the thing was, they came from Google, and Google can speak largely from its experience, and they do a really good job in those books of doing that. But I wanted to know, like what else? Like, what happens if SRE grows up in a different soil than in the Google's amazing engineering culture? I wanted to understand what were the things we had to know next about SRE. And I wanted to also understand what were the social and ethical implications of SRE that we should be thinking about. And so there's some really great chapters in there. One by Liz and Emily about SRE and social justice, something that I'm passionate about and is for sure, I think, relevant these days. And how can we use our SRE mindset to think about making the world a better place. That's why I wanted it to compile this book together. And so there's some amazing contributors to that book, and I feel very honored to be part of it. And I hope it rounds out some of the other books that are out there about SRE in people's thinking, to give them a more wide view of what's SRE like with a broader focus.
Yeah, I've been lucky enough to talk to you a little bit about the book here and there, and know some of the people that were part of that book, and understanding why it made so much sense, because the stories from different places, I think, helps not just show how the SRE idea has been kind of pollinated, but just about how the SRE idea can go in places other than just Google. And that's impressive.
Yeah, it was very clear to me that like Google had some really important things to say, and then the question for me was, okay, well, what if I'm not Google, or what if I don't really understand? What if I don't see myself in that story? I wanted to be able to say, here's some other stories that you might see yourself, and I wanted to make it clear that SRE, the reason why it's called Seeking SRE is, and the Google people agree with me when I talk to them, we don't know what SRE is yet. We know what we're working towards. We know what we're building, but we're all trying to work towards something called SRE. What is that? And so I wanted to give everybody permission to work towards that. I don't know how to segue that into storage, but maybe you do, because
no.
It occurs to me we should head into that realm.
No, we'll get it there in a second, and we'll talk about storage, and I think that's fine. I just wanted to make sure that people could find out a little bit why I really wanted to bring you into the conversation today. And I think a big reason why is that storage on Linux systems was a really great way. When you think about how people like you and me, when we looked about the break-fix way of working with systems, storage was always kind of the beginning of
Yeah.
where the problem started on an individual system basis. Let's not talk about reliability across the board. Let's talk about
Sure.
it. Always seemed to me to really begin where with things on storage, things that were at the early times of just spinning disk would take up a lot of I/O. We would be dealing with slow disks. We would have to replace disks. We would have not enough disk space to manage all of our logs along with the data. And then not only that, we started introducing these SANs and other NASs and things, and they
You bet.
became even more complicated because, introducing a LUN to Windows and to Linux was a completely different animal. You would have to work with different types of machines, some from a company like 3PAR. It was just a thing, I think, is kind of what I wanted to get to more than anything. It was an effort to work with storage.
And still is to a certain extent. I mean, just to be blunt about it, I think the cloud stuff has done a remarkable job of making that much less fiddly, but not entirely. And the place I go back to all this stuff is from the George Carlin routine called Stuff, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like I feel like like all we want is a place for our stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, exactly. And to me, that's what storage is about. It's all about how to make sure that you have a good place for your stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's where we're going to go in this hour. I'm looking forward to digging this because it's super important. I mean, it's so low level that lots of people don't think about it until they do, and when they do, they're not they do that under duress. But I think that lots of people understand that this is underlying almost everything we do, like the ability to keep and retrieve, not only to be able to store but also to be able to retrieve. That's also a key thing. Your stuff is important. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to do the magic that we do with the resources that we have, cloud or otherwise.
Sure. So this is why we're going to bring up some stuff first before we kind of dig into the three problems, because I like to kind of come with three problems every time I do this show. And you don't need to know how to solve them, but you can learn what I know how to solve. And then along the way, I can ask you things that you have a lot of experience around. So reliability, services that need to scale. These are all things you're super educated about, and I think that you have unique takes to really share while we go through the process of solving our three problems.
I'll do my best, but like mostly I'm here to be able to learn. So I'm super psyched to be able to do that.
And that's what I really like to do is I like to help you learn these fundamentals around Azure, because you may have your own kind of specialty. And I think by you having what you're good at and me kind of having what I'm good at, we can work together to actually find out how to answer these problems. Sound good?
Knowledge is power, as they say. So, I want to have the animation that cuts across right now and then dive in.
Now, I'm going to share some links for everybody today in the chats. They're here, and if you can't, you don't need to look at them here. You can just look at them in the chat. So I'm going to post them as a comment. These are the links for today's work that if you'd like to, you can follow along with. I think they'd be useful for you to find out a little bit of all the different things we're going to be working with. So first of all, let's just talk about the basics, which is, let's add this to the stream. Introduction to...
And Jay, I just want to say, ironically, I, as the guest, don't think I can see the chat. Oh, no, I found it. Found the chat.
You go to comments on the right.
Okay, I just want to make people think that I'm ignoring them because I didn't see it. But now I'm looking at comments. We'll call chat comments. That works for me.
So everybody, if you want to say hi to David or myself, if you got questions along the way, got comments, whatever, feel free to put them in. We'll see it. So we're going to talk first before we start solving the problems, just an introduction to the core Azure storage services. Storage, like anything, I think, David, needs to be first and foremost durable and highly available. I think when we're talking about what you've really shared with the world about reliability, it really begins with the durability of the services that you actually build on top of.
Yeah. If you write a bit, you should be able to read it. That seems to be a pretty clear and important goal of any storage system.
Sure. Security, it's just so imperative that storage is encrypted and that encryption is managed in a way that's not difficult anymore. I don't know about you, but I remember managing key pairs and certificates when it came to encrypted storage. Server-side encryption is essentially what I like to deal with. And when you add that kind of enterprise layer, I know you can manage your own keys if you are in that organization. That you need that kind of fine-grained security. You can do that with Azure Storage. So big thing. Scalability, I think, is another big aspect of making sure systems are reliable. And that's a big part of Azure Storage. It's managed. And I think that's a big deal when it comes to any storage. Like all the underlying systems should be handled. All the things related to performance should be handled. All the information that you need should be done by your cloud provider. That's the reason why we choose the cloud, because you choose management. You're not picking this as a data center. You know what I mean?
Yep, somebody else. That becomes somebody else's problem, and that's really a good thing to do.
Mm-hmm. And then the accessibility has always been the big advantage of cloud storage, whether you're using files and blobs. So like if you wanted to use, say, blob storage to do a ton of unstructured data that you're eventually going to serve on a CDN, blob is kind of where you would put it, because then it's all HTTP accessible, and you can either have it cold or hot. Azure Files is something we'll be looking at today. It's NFS. Queues, it's for messaging queues for reliable messaging between. So if you wanted to replace something like RabbitMQ, this is a perfect service. Tables, NoSQL for semi-structured data, I believe. And then disks is kind of one of the things we'll be focused on, I think, a little bit, David, because you and I have worked probably with a million disks on a bunch of servers a billion years ago that all broke at one point. So I think it's cool to kind of look at it, how it's been made easy for us.
Cool. Yeah, I think a blobs is also super useful for random access stuff when you like have lots of, like as you said, like lots of little files and like, like this many million people are going to go grab that image, but you don't know which image it is, and so it's really good to have sort of that ability to go get it, where you don't have to not that when people are like pulling web pages, they're not necessarily trying to list all the images you have. They just want to see the ones on that page, and so it does a really good job of this sort of random access nature.
Yep.
I'm also a big fan of the table stuff because it makes it super easy for you to basically have key value stores if you want to, where without having to dive into SQL, it's just like a table. You just create a table and you put stuff in a table and you pull stuff out of the table, and it's really easy to reason about. It's great for proof of concept stuff from my perspective, because there's not a lot of work to get into it, and there's not a lot of work to pull that data out of it, and I find that be super helpful too.
Cool. So we're going to use disk storage today, I think, a little bit, and we're going to solve some problems. And so the first problem, David, I want to solve, and I think you might have dealt with this, and whether it's physical or maybe online. Right here's our first problem. How can I move a disk from one VM to another? So
right. If you have to, let's say you are upgrading something, or you need to move a data disk so let's say if you're server and you're trying to update that server, or and you need to move it to somewhere other place as you're gonna work on it, etc. Lots of reasons to have to do this.
Yep. So we're gonna solve the problem in a couple different ways, but I'm going to show two different ways actually that we can solve it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to Connect here. So have you ever used Bastion on Azure?
I have not. I know it exists, but I've never tried it. So this is going to be kind of fun to watch.
So last week I showed everybody, and I showed Abel how to set it up. I'm not going to show you how to set it up, but it's essentially you set up another subnet on your network. You can see right here. You set up an additional subnet, and that subnet is configured to allow you to go through here. So we'll go to Bastion right here in the web browser. And so now I can just type in my username, which is just J. I actually can just provide my private key locally. So the easiest way to do this on a Mac, you type open SSH, and that'll automatically just open your SSH directory with all your keys. And then what you do, because I don't want to really paste my private key, I don't like sending it. I'd rather just have the file go over encrypted anyway. So I can just go ahead and put my private key and then click connect.
And so this is going to be like a jump box thing, right? Where I can.
That's exactly what it is.
Okay, cool.
And it'll work with both Linux and with Windows. So either way, you need to use. Yeah, I love it. So, all right, we're here on this server. Let me see if I can increase the view a little bit. Zoom in. Nah. All right, so this is about the zoomiest in I can get. So this, I don't really have to. What's great is I don't have to set rules up for SSH on the network. I can just use Bastion. So let's take a look at what's our problem here. df-h, we've got this big disk right here. You see here?
Mm-hmm.
And it's 100% use. So this is a problem. And the first thing that we need to do is we want to move this disk to another machine for whatever reason. Let's say we have a reason.
Sure.
But we need to
for reasons.
But we need to keep this machine online. Is at least the thing we'd like to do. So what we're going to do is hop in here to the portal. We'll leave the SSH session up. And what I'm going to do is, so normally what you could do if we wanted to move this disk is we could run a command to detach it. And we can do that. Maybe we will. We could run a command to detach it. And then we can essentially take the detached disk and attach it to another machine. The problem with that sometimes is having to deallocate the machine, which is essentially turning it off. So let's go here and we'll go to the actual machine here. Let me make some room, make it a little bigger. And so we've got this just straight up VM. Now let's go to the disks section of this VM, okay? So if you go here to the VM, ooh, come on. Let me just refresh. Sometimes it helps. Okay, cool. And then what we'll do is go to disks. So here's the disk itself. And let me expand this a little.
I want to thank you for zooming for those of us who are elderly and of poor eyesight. So thank you for making it bigger.
So what I can do here is go to edit on the disk. And then you can see here, there's a detach. And so I could easily just detach it and then go to the other server. So let's detach it. Now it's deallocated. I click save. And so now I have a problem on the machine, though, because now I have an empty mount point. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So when you detach it, where does it go?
It just goes back into the resource group and it becomes a deallocated disk. So now, so so it's updating it right now, and we'll pretend that now we're on the next server, okay? And what we're going to do is go back to the next server. We're going to add the data disk. So we're going to leave the LUN as 0. That's going to be the device name. And then what we're going to do is we're going to find this disk. And so right here it is. Disk 01 data 02 is the logical name that was provided. And what we'll do is as you can see, it's a premium SSD storage account, which means it's completely managed storage. We don't have to worry about any of the failures that are associated. Encryption isn't available. I just didn't. This is just a dummy disk for this. If we were using it, we would. And then we can enable host caching. So let's say we have heavy writes on this disk. So we can enable read write there. And then once we're done, we click save. So let's say we're on the new server. And once this is completed, it'll go ahead and it'll attach. So if we demessage this right here, we'll see the disk gets attached again. So let's go ahead and take a look. Mount disk. Okay, so I got a sudo. Okay, so it remounted. So because I reattached the disk and it had the same mount point. So let's go to disk. Let's see if it's there. Yep, so there. So I was able to kind of detach the disk, and then let's say somewhere in there we copied all the FS tab information. You can see it right here. I always use UUID. I think it's the best way to do it because it doesn't matter what device it comes up as. If you always use UUID in the FS tab, I think it always makes sense. We're going to see how that'll work a little bit more. So there's a second way we can do this, David, that I think also can make a little bit more sense. If we were going to do this online and we couldn't detach the disk. So we can go back here and we can go to the resource group that this virtual machine is in. So we'll go to AFB, which is the resource group. And we're going to find that disk that was attached. And so it was disk 01 data 02. So we'll click on that. And so what we can do right here is create a snapshot. So we can do this with Azure CLI if we want to. We can just use, I'll just do it here. Let me make this a little bigger. AZ VM, I think it's AZVM disk is the command. So yeah, there's some subcommands of the AZVM disk that we could do this with. Well, we're going to do this because, go ahead.
I was going to say, Jay, so is this a snapshot like a VMware snapshot or any of the sort of Linux file system snapshots?
Yeah. It's a disk snapshot. So what it's going to do is like a VMware snapshot. And so, or any out of, or even like a Hyper-V snapshot. It's essentially going to look at the block attached disk as a logical thing that it can say snap. So that's what we're going to do right here. We're going to click create snapshot. And so we can do this online. We don't have to take it off. The only reason we would want to take it offline, I think, is if we were hosting some sort of data that was transactional. So let's say we had like a database or we had something was constantly running, and then we might want to just stop and then snapshot it and then hold both of them in like a holding pattern and then run them both at the same time. Because let's say we're snapshotting it to put it on two different machines so that they can be some sort of redundant pair. This is the reason why we would want to do this. So what we can do right now is create this new snapshot, and we'll just call it snap 01 data 01. And so we can pick the type, make a complete read-only copy or incremental. We don't have an existing snapshot to do an incremental from, so we're just going to do a full. And then the storage type, you can switch between the managed disks to support your workload or scenario. We're going to just use premium SSD because that's the kind that we've been using. And then
so you can make a snapshot using a different kind of storage than the original.
Exactly.
Because that seems really interesting. Because then you could snapshot for cheaper storage, or you could snapshot for faster for some sort of testing or something like that. That's a cool feature, I have to say.
So this is the storage option that we had also. These are Azure Zone Redundant Storage, ZRS. This is a synchronous across multiple. So this is a huge availability thing, is what I've kind of been talking with you about, how we go along the way and use. So the ability to have zone storage, give me just an idea of how important that is for a big application.
Well, I mean, it is the thing that allows you to have some sense of confidence that if you drop a data center or drop a rack in a data center, that you're going to be in okay shape immediately versus having to restore from backup and stuff like that. So I think that's from that perspective, it's super important.
So I've gone through the last parts, and it's going to do everything that you do with ARM. It's going to go through the process, and it's even going to create a template for creating snapshots. So we could actually templatize the process. So if we wanted to automate snapshots and actually do version control of them somehow, of like snap 01, date, we could actually download this template here. And if you look within the template, we've got scripts. So we can then eventually run a script through PowerShell. We could write something in Bash. We could even just use the JSON and a simple command and automate the process of snapshots, and even run it actually through an Azure function. So like that would ultimately be what you would want to do to automate the process. Is just have an Azure function created whenever you work on it. So did I kind of
standing in for a cron job in that particular case?
And I mean,
right, like a scheduled Azure function sort of thing.
Yeah, because I think ultimately for me, one of the best things about the cloud is the death of the cron server. You
Oh,
know
you're
what I
so
mean?
cruel. Yeah, I understand, but you're so cruel. Do you not miss the different fields and the asterisk in the right place and stuff like that?
It's
Guess you
just
don't, huh?
it's not really necessary anymore, and I think that that's big. The big reason why I would actually say there's a huge need because when you're thinking about the cloud, you should have instances that can withstand failure.
Sure.
And if they go away, then you get replaced with something else. And so an individual cron server having to reconfigure different things, I don't want to deal with that. I
Hmm.
want it to. I want the crons to happen across all the servers based on some sort of HTTP call if it can be that way. I think that's the kind of thing that I'm thinking about nowadays. So
Versus
anyhow,
depending on a single machine to make sure that it's alive at the time it has to run the thing, and if it doesn't, you lose.
you
Yeah,
got
kind of
it
the who
right.
watches the watcher thing. Yeah, it makes total sense.
So here's what I'm going to do is I'm also going to open up. I'm going to leave this right here. I'm going to open in a new tab, and I'm going to actually SSH into our second server. So the server that we're going to copy this disk
Okay.
onto. So here's my second machine. I'm going to connect via Bastion as well. So that's the great thing. You set up one Bastion network, it'll work for all the machines in the virtual network. So same thing here. J, my SSH private key local storage, connect. So now I've got my two servers. I'm going to be actually, yeah, here. Cool. I got my server 1, server 2. Cool. Oh, I was already out of VI. So what we're going to do now is we've got this snapshot of Disco on data 02, right?
Mm-hmm.
So now what we can actually do is go back to the resource group. We're going to type here disk. We're just going to go to a managed disk, and we're going to create one. And so what we're going to do is we're going to create this new disk, and we're going to call it data disk 01, 02, 03, whatever. I don't know. Naming things is dumb. We're going to put it in the same region that our other resources are in. It's very, very important. Then
Right.
we're gonna not worry about the availability zone. We're just going to choose none. That's not important right now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to keep the same size, 256. Okay. And so we'll go to encryption. We'll keep the encryption at rest. Then we'll go to review and create. But I made a mistake. I'm missing something. I don't need to do it this way because I don't seem to be able to build it with my disk image, right? So it's not really useful to me. So what I am going to do is I'm going to go back to home. So that's how I would just create a managed disk. But I want to create something specific for my my VM.
Right.
I want that image to get on here. So what I'm going to do here is go to disks. And I'm going to add this data disk right here. So what I can do is where you go here to name, you can actually create a new disk. We'll call it disk 01, cool disk. The source type is the big thing right here. So the source type is from a snapshot or a blob in storage of an image. So if you pulled an image from like somewhere else and you stored it in a blob, like a VHD, you could load that. But what we're going to do is go here to snapshot, and here's my snapshot right here. We're going to make sure the disk size is the same. Then we're going to go to OK. Encryption type will leave. We'll validate. It's now going to create the disk on here. So now if we go to that server, we're going to just wait a second. We can look in dmessage. It's eventually should attach it. Let's take a look. It may be just taking a second to allocate the snapshot. So yep, successfully created the disk. So let's go to that machine. Where is it? Sudo message. Did I attach to the right machine? says, oh, you know what I forgot to do? You have to hit save.
Yeah, that seems.
And now,
there's your problem.
So it created the disk, but it has to. You have to hit save to have it actually attach.
Right, to change the configuration.
Okay, there it is. Excuse me for drinking. It's like 1 trillion degrees here in New York. Okay, so it came up as SDC. So it should have, SDC1. So all we have to do now is block ID, dev SDC1. And that's getting that block ID that UUID we can actually mount the disk with, so we don't have to actually use that SDC. Because sometimes if you reboot in the cloud, I've noticed that the device names will change. It's happened to me. I don't know if it's ever happened to you. So all we're going to do is we're going to VI etc fstab. And so this is kind of like, go ahead.
I have a question for you, but I want you to finish that last thing, and then I have a question.
Sure. So what I did was I just copied this line. I replaced the UUID. Let me just remove these quotes. Okay, so we're going to mount the drive in the same mount point. And so we're going to use /disk. And so I want to also do one thing to make sure it's consistent. As you see, here are our mount properties. So I want to make sure those are replicated as well. So default, no fail, no A time. No A time is great if you have a disk with a lot of reads. It removes a little bit of the I/O overhead. So we'll just remove discard. No fail. And no A time. Cool. And so we just got to make that directory. So we'll make dir disk mount disk. So that problem has kind of been solved, David. The first big problem, because now we'll ls-al disk, and there's a we did it 2 different ways. So we moved the disk from one to the other by detaching it using Azure and then reattaching it. And so that's a way to kind of, the way to think about it is just unplug and plug in. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it's useful in a certain context. But like if you want to get this done fast, you just, detach, you're done. But I like the idea of now we have a redundant pair.
Yep.
And so doing the snapshot method remains, to me, probably the better way of doing it. Only because I like the idea of not having to ever have either one off, never having one always online as well. So always having that one part, even though we need to copy the disk to the other machine, we're still serving our original machine no matter what. And then we can just update the load balancer. We have 2 machines doing it, and we move on with our lives.
So let me ask you a question about this. So just so I'm clear, when you've done that and you've created the second disk based on the snapshot, there is no longer a relationship between the original disk as seen by machine 1 and the new disk as seen by disk 2, and so the actual data at that point starts to diverge.
Exactly.
Necessarily. So having it in the load balancer is cool as long as you're not in a situation where you're expecting to be able to hit either one of them and see the same exact thing.
Yeah, then it eventually becomes you need to create some sort of consistency between the 2 machines, and we're going to get to that. That's a big part of the next part of this. So
excellent.
The next problem we're going to solve though is we've got a bigger problem here. So what we're going to do is we're going to query some logs, and I know you know a lot about this.
I love me some logs, yeah.
So we're going to go over to server 1, and we're going to take a look at something. So I enabled diagnostic settings. You can go in here, you can click enable, you click save, and you get a ton of extra information. And I think that's important for this. And then what we're going to do, excuse me, I didn't mean to do that. We're going to go to Azure Monitor. Where is it? Monitor. There we are. So we're going to go to Azure Monitor. And what we're going to do is we're going to query some logs. And so if we go here to search logs, we want to find out about virtual machine free disk space. I think that this is really, really useful for what we want to do is we want to find out if we have enough disk space. And if we don't, we need to fix the problem. So let's click run. And so this is a problem right here. We see this. So why don't you tell me a little bit about this, David? This section.
Yeah,
right
so
here.
tell you about the problem and tell you what people are seeing. I can definitely tell you what people are seeing. I haven't
Yes,
looked at the problem
please.
carefully. So what we're looking at here is we're looking at basically the Query Explorer in Log Analytics, which is part of Azure Monitor. And so what the Query Explorer allows us to do is write fairly simple queries using a language called KQL, or the Cousteau query language, which is what you see there on the screen. It's not like SQL, but it's not that different, quite frankly. And so the way, yeah, that makes it even easier to see. So the way KQL queries look is they first start off, you can see the thing that says perf there. So perf is the table that this is all coming from. You can think of it as a database. And then after that, there are these pipe characters that say, okay, that say, what are the query terms? So in this case, we're saying pipe where the object name is this thing, or the object name is that thing. And we want to also make sure where I want to make sure I get this right, where the counter name equals 3 megabytes. And then we're going to do a little bit of math with this summarize, where we're basically just going to sort of do some averaging out so you can see this. And then the last line is going to say, here are the things I want to report on. Here are the output fields that are going to come out of this. And so KQL allows you to write these really simple queries. And what you saw Jay doing also is that there are a whole bunch of pre-written queries that show up when you go into Azure. If Azure Monitor can tell kind of the sort of stuff that you're doing, it will do its best to give you a set of like, hey, here are some example queries that you might want to try running. That's this screen right here. And that makes it super easy. You just click on it and run it. And so you can, with this information, get the information you want. And I think that's where Jay's going to go. It's my best guess is to work with that information. You can stick this in a dashboard. You can embed it in a workbook. It's just like I love it to death because it's like a Swiss Army knife that allows you to go at your logs and use them in certain ways that turns out to be really easy. Once you get the basics of KQL, which I assert you can do in 10 minutes, 15 minutes, you are off to the races. And let's get back to the races.
So the problem is that we are out of disk space right here. Big problem. So we have to solve that. And so what we're going to do is there's this great document here, expanding virtual hard disks on a Linux VM with Azure CLI. And so that's what we're going to work with today. I love how great and specific our documentation is to use cases. And so what we're going to do is we're going to take care of the use case here. So we know /disk on this machine is not working out. And so what we're going to do is we are going to expand the disk, and we're going to use CLI. We did a little something today with our the portal, but let's do this in the CLI. Oh, so we could do it here in Cloud Shell, or we can use Azure CLI right in our browser. So what we want to do is we have that hard drive.
Hey, Jay, what's Azure Cloud Shell? I just want to make sure. Do your viewers already know it? Because I just want to make sure they know that. Because like we just did something in Bastion. Cloud Shell is going to look is going to look pretty similar. I don't know if they're used to you jumping into Cloud Shell, because I like it too, but I don't know about it.
We've done a lot about Cloud Shell. If you don't know, Cloud Shell is right here. It's built into Azure. It lets you run all these different functions, whether you want to do it in Bash or in PowerShell. I use Bash a lot because it's what I know. So I like also the Azure CLI that's built into it. You can do it here. You can do it here. So the one thing that's great about doing it in the browser is that we can actually work together with the browser and the problem and fix it so we can kind of see both things. So we might need some information, and we could just copy and paste it if we really need it. So
yeah, totally.
What we're going to do.
I think it's really cool to just be able to pop, if you have a browser, be able to pop up basically what feels like a Linux shell to me that you can then type stuff at. And that's just super cool.
So the disk on the machine we need to increase is this disk right here, disk 01 data 02. So if we go here into the documentation, we need to first deallocate the disk. So that essentially means shutting it off. And so all we really need to do is go to Overview, and we got to stop it. And click Yes. This is a necessity when working with these disks when you need to resize them. There's no getting around it.
Because it would be dangerous any other way, quite frankly.
Exactly. So I could have deallocated the disk using AZVM deallocate. Essentially means shut it off.
Right, but does not mean delete. Deallocate is different than delete. Like, I mean, I know my heart would be racing a little bit the first time I typed to deallocate, you know, thinking like, oh, maybe I'm going to get rid of this data, but you're not. You're just basically, as you said, quiescing it and essentially turning it off.
Yep. So here we go, deallocating. And while it's doing that, let's take a look at the command that it's going to want us to run. So it's a very simple AZ disk update. It's a simple Azure CLI command that's going to tell us we want to update. So AZ disk update, the resource group. Sorry, I always get nervous when people watch me. And then the name of the resource group is AFB. The disk, so we'll just type name and the name of the disk that we're going to be working with. What did we say it was? Let's go back over to disks. That's why we do this way. I think it's easy. There's a command that we could have got a list from, but this is super easy. Copy the name, and then what we're going to do is give the new size. So the existing size right here is 256. We've maxed that out, and now we can make this, I think, the max of 2 terabytes. So what we're going to do is just max it out. What do you think? We're cloud privileged. You know?
I'm about to say we're cloud advocates, and now it's sort of like we get to jump off the cliff. But go for it.
So, what did I do wrong? Oh, I size DB, no size GB. DB was the old job. All right. So it's attached, so we can't resize it until we detach the disk. So what we do is we go here to edit. We can do that in the CLI as well, but I'm just going to do it this way. So now we've deallocated the disk. Let's resize it. And so
just to be clear, you've turned it off, and the detaching thing is to make sure that it's not still expected by any VM or mounted. Like there's no machine talking to it when you detach it, right?
Exactly. And so if I had another disk that I wanted to do this with, where I've already created a new snapshot image of this, I could have done that. And then I could have just attached the disk and resized it. In this case, what we're going to do is just resize the disk. Let's say for whatever reason, that's what we need. All right, we're still deallocating the machine.
So when you're done with this, are you going to get something that can be 2 terabytes, or is there now 2 terabytes sitting somewhere that is already allocated and only gets used by you?
It is going to be me taking. Think of it like a rubber band. 256, 2 terabytes.
Okay, great. So you go all the way up there. Okay.
Yep. So essentially, you're changing the block storage from one size to another. So it's still updating. That means it's just it's detaching the storage from the disk. Okay. Are we almost done?
And what if I wanted to decrease it? What if I typed launch instead of lunch? Like, can you make it go smaller after I've said 2 terabytes? Can it come back down to 1?
Nope. You would have to create a snapshot of the disk in that smaller size, and then recreate the disk doing that way. So kind of what we were doing before. Come on, guys, let's go. I don't know why this is taking a little bit right now.
So you can embiggen it, but you can't make it smaller.
Exactly. Okay, so it's still stopping the machine and updating the disk so that we can detach it. It's running a little slowly. So while that's going on, we're going to figure out a way to solve the third problem.
Cool.
Which is, while that's happening in the background, the other machine has the same problem, and we're not really storing our structured data in a way where it would be replicated. Like, we have 2 different disks, and they're going to have a split brain. And we can kind of correct that. And we can correct that if we go into the resource group. And we can actually create a Samba NFS share in the cloud that all of our machines can share. So what we can do is go here into our AFB resource group, click Add, and what we're going to do is type storage account. And in the storage account, we'll just create a new area to create some logical storage. So we'll just call this storage account SMB-NFS, just for the sake of calling it that. We're going to put in East, so it's matching the rest of our infrastructure. We're going to keep the performance. There's two different types of disks. We can go standard or premium. We'll just leave it as is. Our storage is V2, general purpose. Replication, we can choose different types of replication methods. What we're going to just use is all these defaults. We're going to leave it hot. We're going to need to get at that data. We don't want it to be cold. So we'll go ahead, we'll click create, and in just a second, that storage account will be created. So let's see what's going on here. All right, so our virtual disk is detached. So now what we're going to do is that AZ disk update. And so it's going to send this command to Azure Resource Manager. And what Azure Resource Manager did is it created a new size of that disk. So it went from 250 to 2000. So that's our new setting for that disk. So now what we can do is we can go back to the disk here in the machine. We can re-add it. So we'll go to name. You can see right now it's 2000. I could have done 2048, and that probably would have been smarter, but I didn't. So we'll click save. And so the next part of this is turning the machine back on, David. And then I think you probably know the process of Resize FS and all that, but that's kind of the next part. What we do is go back in with Bastion, machines deallocate. Oh, we got to turn it back on. Duh. So the machine gets turned back on, and then we go through the process because we're running short on time, and I want to get us through this. What we do is re-add the disk, and then eventually use E2 FSCK to clean the disk and make sure all the file systems are set up, all the blocks are set up properly. Then we would use EFS grow or FS grow. And then we would basically just fix it after. I also use parted. I don't know if you use parted.
I have so the basic thing, the theory here is that congratulations, the disk is bigger, but the file system isn't bigger yet. And if we want the file system to take up more space on the disk, we have to extend the file system out, which is going to require us to use some native tool under Linux. Pick your favorite native tool to do it, to expand it out, to say, yeah, you can eat the whole disk, go for it.
Exactly. And then you remount the file system with the new size.
Right.
So it goes from 256 to 2000. So the other thing we could do is getting rid of that split brain scenario is we created a storage account. Now we can go here to file shares. And within file shares, we could just click plus file share, and it'll start creating a cloud-based NFS service for us. So I can just call it NFS service or NFS mount. And we can pick how much our quota is. Let's see, up to 5 terabytes. So that's huge. So rather than having to need to grow that data disk to 2000, we can just use disks. And now we've got this NFS mount, right? We have to use it. Let's get it onto these servers. So let's go ahead. Let's go back on to the 2 Bastion servers. So let's connect to this machine. J. Private key, and then we're going to wrap up. All right, David?
Yeah, sure. I have this recollection that you get like the portal can even tell you the commands to type, after you've created a file share.
And so that's exactly what we're doing right now. So we wanted to go into the machines that eventually we're going to use the share with, and then all we have to do now is go to connect in the 3 dots on the side. And so we'll just go here to Linux. And we'll
this is my favorite part.
So we'll copy
It's
this.
like, here it is. You don't have to know it. It's just here.
Something with that one. It's still booting up. So now all we have to do is essentially just copy that command. And here, it's just a few commands that creates a file to automatically connect. And so let's see, we now have this file system in mount smb NFS. So let's go there. So cd mount smb NFS. So let's touch AzureFunBytes. And we can go over here to our NFS mount. And we should be able to refresh if we go into it. And there it is. So that's how all that kind of comes together. That's how we solve our 3 problems. I really wish I was able to grow that disk for us really quickly. But I want to make sure that we get a chance to kind of wrap up. What do you say, David?
Yeah, it sounds great. So I think this was a really good demonstration of just working with file systems and how easy it is to do it and to get what to do what used to be really hard is much easier now, and I totally dig it.
Yeah, I think it's what's really made a lot of this simpler for us all is the fact that we don't have to struggle quite as much to have storage work for us. We don't have to necessarily, groan about the tough stuff anymore. I think that what we can do is look for better options that are native to the cloud. And if we do that, I think with Azure, you can really see a ton of, I don't know, I guess the word is reliability to what you're doing in there. So I'm going to play the end of the show music.
Excellent. Yeah, thank you, Jay, for putting the fun in AzureFunBytes.
Hey, man, I really appreciate you kind of being here with me today, David. It was super, super helpful to kind of have you tell me all this stuff and teach me about reliability and all that other stuff. It was a really great time. I super appreciate you answering people's questions, mainly mine, on what we're doing with reliability, with storage, and also just coming along for this little journey. I hope you dug it.
Oh yeah, totally. It was grand. Let me know when the next one is and you want me to show up with. I would be delighted to be here. Thanks for having me.
No problem. Thank you very much, David. I'll see you next time, all right?
Yes, please.
Well, everybody, it's another AzureFunBytes, and I think that this was a lot of fun. I want to thank you all for being part of this. Every time we do it, I think we have a great time. If you have any questions or comments before we go, I'd love to hear from you. If not, I think we'll just kind of let it roll. All right, then. We'll see you next time. My name's Jay Gordon, and this has been AzureFunBytes. Bye-bye.